Hello everyone, Sergeant Will Ashmore here with Army Sports Car Racing, and we are back with the Sunvit-D3 Army F430 as we continue to try and fix the gearbox issues that you would have seen in episode 1. And if you haven't seen that episode, do look back because we pull apart the guts on the F430's gearbox. I've been clearly hunting down parts and doing lots of research into what I need to get done on this gearbox, and also trying to work out why we had the issue in the first place, because as I said last time, it's pretty random that we've snapped a synchro ring like that, and I've got a few ideas. And so one of the things that I've managed to acquire is a genuine Ferrari gearbox overhaul manual. Now, Ferrari manuals are amazing, they're incredibly detailed, and if we can get past a blank screen, you know, you can't go too far wrong, but they do list like a lot of tools, specific Ferrari tools that you just can't really get hold of. But you know, Christ, even Haynes manual should aspire to be as good as these manuals are. They are so detailed, and they cover absolutely everything. I'll find it in a minute and show you, but what's really interesting is the hydraulic actuator. I've quickly found the page. So what's really interesting is I found this in the manual, and it talks about, remember me talking about this, hopefully you can see what I'm pointing to here, that the hydraulic actuator that move up and down and actuate the shift forks inside the gearbox. Now, Ferrari lists a tool, which I have managed to get hold of, a replica tool. Oh, it's a bit of a lump. So it's this tool here, which is made by a company called Hill Engineering, and it's a replica of the AB3271 tool that you can see on the diagram there. Now, how this tool works is it works to center the sort of ball in the shift mechanism, in the actuator. We'll go through how we're going to do that in a minute, but I just had it stuck in the back of my mind that I noticed on, and hopefully it is out of whack, but I feel like I noticed on the car, and we'll look at it now. So here we are looking at the mechanism itself, and I don't know about you, but if we get that kind of centered, to me the ball looks like it's slightly rearward. Hoping that is slightly out of adjustment, and it might have been overstressing the third to fourth gear synchro. It might have been pushing it too hard one way and not enough the other way, and just causing a little bit of premature wear, which might have made it destroy itself. But we're going to go through that process now. I'm going to see what we need to do with this jig, bolt it to the actuator and do the measurements, and hopefully it's going to show me that it's off by some degree. Either way, we'll get it recentered, and that'll be the first step towards putting the car back together. Secondly, so we've got a shift fork and a synchro, and that comes with all of the internal parts, which we'll need to pull apart on the gear set, which I might try and get done today, but I need to work out some tools. We've got some O-rings, so I've got the big O-ring for the ring gear plate, some of the internal pressure sort of pump O-rings, I think they're largely the same. We've got a new sort of front main shaft bearing. I'm waiting on a few more bearings that sit inside the gearbox casing, and then we can get the rest of the box built. But what I'd like to get done today is checking the measurements on the actuator, and perhaps, but like I say, I need to make some tools, or at least get the tools made and know that we're going to be in a good spot to start rebuilding the gear set. Okay, so the first thing that it calls for is to measure the ball, the center distance between the ball. So we'll get our trusty caliper here and try and get it on the widest point. So we've got 14.7, that just slides through there nice with a tiny bit of resistance, pushing up to a little bit wider. We'll go for 14.8 or 14.75. And then coming back to the manual, you can see we're actually in the range, 14.75, 14.8. So we then need to fit the jig, and using a feeler gauge, we put a feeler gauge in of a certain gap based on our measurement that we took there. So at 14.75, 14.8, it's somewhere between a 0.2 and a 0.25 millimeter feeler gauge. So I'll work in the middle of those two. I think, you know, 0.05 of a mil isn't going to make the world of difference if we're far out. but basically loosen up the lock nut for the centre ball, put the feeler gauge in and push it up against that feeler gauge, and then re-tighten down the lock bolt. So a pretty simple process, but what I want to do first is see how far out we are in its current state, and hopefully it's out a fair amount, but we'll see now. Alright, so I've just positioned the actuator unit in a bit of an easier place to work on and for you guys to see, but hopefully you can see even more clearly now the shift. I'm going to call this the shift ball. This is like the bottom of your gear stick, the ball on your gear stick that moves around. But anyway, so you can see it's not centered. So as this part here sort of rotates up and down, this is constantly going to be knocking those shift forks inside the gearbox, you know, banging them as it moves up and down. So clearly it needs to be centered, and that's why I found out about buying this tool, which quite simply slots on here. And with that slotted on now, I remeasured the width of the ball, and we were getting closer to 14.75 mil, so we should be using a 0.25 mil feeler gauge, but as you can probably already see in here, we've got about a 3 mil gap. There's a ton of room in there, and I started then questioning myself, you know, should this be going in a different way, rotated up, you know, upside down, but it just won't physically fit. I mean, I'll show you. So of all of my harping on about how good the Ferrari manuals are, the manual for this specific part of the gearbox, I mean, it really doesn't fit in there. But they showed the actuator from a 360. Okay guys, so a little bit later in the day, I've really been faffing around with this because I just wasn't happy with when I had the jig up this way round, because it just seemed to throw this like really down low and off centre. So what I have done is taken off the potentiometers, and you know, when you look at this versus a 360 version, it's all very similar apart from where the potentiometers sit. So because I think this was originally designed for a 360, we've gone for it being that way up, and now it sits perfectly flush on the mounting face of the actuator, and you can see now I've got the ball nice and centered in its position, and a 0.25 feeler gauge just about fits down there with a nice bit of drag. So hopefully that's where it needs to be. Now I've done this, I'm going to have to get the potentiometer. We'll have to go through a relearn procedure. I need to get the software and the tool to do that, which is pretty expensive, so I might see if I can borrow one in the time being. But if you ever do this on a 430, there's a few videos out there on doing this on a 360, and it looks really straightforward. On a 430, there isn't anything, so hopefully this will be useful for someone, knowing if you buy this tool, you need to take off the potentiometer plate to be able to fit this nice and flush and do your measurements correctly. Also, what I've found is plugging it into the car, running through the gears and going back to neutral, this doesn't sit, it sits centrally, sort of laterally, but vertically it doesn't re-center itself unless you put it into reverse, and then it seems to re-center itself when you go back to neutral from reverse. So that's what I've been working on. Hopefully that is like its resting neutral point, so that when I've undone this bolt and put it in to measure it, because once you loosen the bolt off underneath, this whole assembly can swing up and down on the shaft. So what you don't want to do is have the shaft sort of twisted off kilter, thinking you've got this centered, and then when it actually centers itself in its neutral position, the ball could be like right down here. So yeah, long story short, hopefully now this is centered. I'll need to go for a relearn procedure, and I might have to pull this apart again and do it all again once I have the software to be able to program this. But that's that done for now, so let's move on to the next bit. Right, let's crack on with this. Alright, there's the gear shafts out. So we've got the main shaft and relay shaft. I don't need to touch this. I'm going to have a quick inspection of it and make sure everything is okay, but I'm pretty sure it is. You know, I was looking at the bearing and stuff, it's perfectly fine. I don't really see any need to try and pull that off and change it. What I do need to attack is obviously getting this synchro out, and that'll involve undoing these nuts here, which I'm probably going to have to make a tool for, pulling the bearing off, and I've got a new bearing to replace this one. But again, this one seems totally fine, but if I'm pulling it off, you know, it's going to come off anyway. Once they're out of the way, they might even just slide off, but I might have to get a puller to pull off the, I think this is third gear or fourth gear. Third gear, because it's slightly bigger. And then the synchro can come out, and once the synchro's out, the new one can go in, I'll oil it up and put it all back together. The shift forks, the shift assembly came apart just fine, so all I need to do is slide that off of this shaft and put the new one on. We could do that right now. Right, so just before I put this together, straight away I've noticed, look at the difference in thickness between the two shift forks. Now, I mean, where it broke, you know, I can't say that it's any thicker, but certainly this is a more substantial piece than the new one. The actual dimensions, as far as I can tell, are the same. You know, if I lay these down flat, the heights and everything is the same. It fits onto the actual shaft absolutely fine. So, you know, the question then begs, is this a revised part, or is that a revised part? I mean, this is going to be as old as the car, so this will be a 2006 fork. Is this a slightly revised one? I might have a quick look online just to see if the part number was replaced with a newer one. But yeah, that's really, really interesting. The next thing we need to do is get these two small lock nuts off of this main shaft. Then we can pull off the bearing and the gear, and finally the synchro to replace that. So Ferrari, of course, calls for a special tool to be able to get these off. But I just happen to have an old tow hook thing that I used to have for the Civic. Who remembers those days? Comment below. But yeah, perfect fit there. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to clean out the metal off of this and weld in a couple of tabs either side and shape them to fit in here. I think that'll be the quickest option to make this work. There we go, one Ferrari special tool made. That's nice and tight on there. So we just need to lock the shaft down, and hopefully I can get these loose. Right, I've actually lost track of where we're at with this bloody video I'm trying to make. This is the third day now, and I'm stuck trying to pry this synchro off of the main shaft. So everything else slips off nice and easy, but this part seems to be locked solid to the main shaft. I've had a hydraulic pull on it, and it's just causing me grief. Now the proper tool, again, special Ferrari tool that you need is, you can see down inside there is a 3-prong puller that fits down inside. So I'm going to try and make something now that fits in there, so I can use a 3-prong puller to try and pull it off. Otherwise I'm going to weld something to it and get it off that way. The issue is, so what I could potentially do is press up on, I think this is 4th gear. However, yeah, I just don't want to damage stuff. This should actually come up quite easy. So I could come underneath the synchro ring for 4th gear and press up from there. But I really don't want to risk damaging this gear because, well, it's going to be bloody expensive if I can even find one. And it's already took a few little knocks where the synchros come apart, which I might try and clean up. But overall, that one's not great. It's not too bad. It should survive. I might just take some of the rough edges off just to stop any sort of hot spots being created. It's all not bad. That's the worst point. It's had a bit of a nick there. But once it's off the shaft, I'll be able to have a play of it. But looking at the parts diagrams, there's nothing. There shouldn't be anything stopping this come off, and it should actually just slide off. So there might be. It's either been tweaked slightly where the synchro sleeve came away, or this is maybe some of the reason why, if it's on a slight twist, not that I can see anything by eye, but if there's something's off with this, that could be why it failed as well. Anyway, let's make another tool and try and get this thing off. So Ferrari tool attempt number 1 has failed. I had to basically shave down this 3-prong puller to fit into the lugs where it should be fitting into, and just started cranking on it, and this one has snapped. I am extremely tempted to weld these to a synchro. I think welding to it and putting a bit of heat in here won't hurt it. I'll obviously have to protect everything else from the weld, but I'm kind of running out of ideas to get this off. Right, we're going to weld this. I've really thought about whether I should or not, and it scares the shit out of me doing this because this is going to be a permanent sort of thing, and if it doesn't come off, then we're going to be cutting it off, or God knows. I did think about can I just use the new synchro sleeve to go over this, and go back to where it was, because this actually isn't that damaged, but then everything else in the gearbox has come apart as it should. Now I'm certain this should just slide off of here, or at least with a little bit of puller pressure, pull it off without too much difficulty. It's just a splined bit of shaft. I can look at the new synchro and it all looks fine. So that to me says something is wrong with this. It's either overheated or tweaked and it's on a twist or something. So to me, logic says it has to come off and be replaced. I've got the spare part. I don't need that part of the synchro to stay on there. But without being able to pull from underneath or anything else, the way this is set up now, this will weld quite nice. I should get a nice good bit of weld on. Actually, putting a bit of heat into this won't hurt it. I'm just really conscious of the gears sit on a plastic roller bearing, or the cage is made of plastic, the bearings are obviously metal. So I don't want to put too much heat into it and damage that. I've protected this with wet cloth, and then the immediate areas I've just gone over with a bit of masking tape just for any splatter, so it doesn't stick to any of the bits that we want to keep nice. But yeah, fingers crossed everyone. Oh my god, honestly, I haven't been that scared about doing something on a car since I didn't know what I was doing with cars. 15 grand gearbox I've just started welding bits onto. But look at that, I've got a bit of a trophy out of it. We'll definitely be keeping that for something. Yeah, she's off, thank bloody god. I'm going to grab the other synchro now and just see if it slots on like it should, or if it needs to be pressed on, because if it does, I'll be pulling it apart same as that, and if only I had an oven here I'd put it in the oven, but I'll probably certainly get some good heat on it just to make it grow a tiny bit, and hopefully she'll slide on, but we'll give it a bit of gearbox oil as well just to help her, and we'll go from there. So the only other thing I need to do is, there's a few tiny little chips on fourth gear, so I'm just going to try and sort them out now with a very fine file. That's the worst one really. Clean that up, and then finally we can start putting it back together. Okay guys, I am going to call it a day, end of episode there. I think it's a good milestone in this gearbox rebuild. We've fully disassembled everything we need to take apart with this. So yeah, I guess look forward to the next episode where we'll be starting to put it all back together and see what stress that causes. I am going to make a little oven for that inner synchro ring to hopefully just expand it a bit to get it back on nice and easily. But there she is, all in a million pieces. I'll have to remember how to put it all back together. So thanks again for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to the next one. See you later guys, cheers.